Hello, hi, thanks for joining us for another edition of the VAC Safeguarding Podcast. Today, my guest is John from the HA9 Consultancy. He's got a lot of fantastic experience, and we're going to talk a little bit about safeguarding and physical security in community settings. So let's get straight into it. John, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your work with Camden, but also how HA9 Consultancy started, basically. Yeah.
Hi Dianne. Yes, as you say, my name's John Bayley. I'm the Managing Director and founder of HA9 Consultancy, which was formed after retiring from the Metropolitan Police in 2014. Right. An opportunity became available through the Home Office, and that was on a project they wanted me to work on, which was supporting supplementary schools. This has been running for about 7 years and involves working in partnership with several local authorities and offering support to community-based supplementary schools. So supplementary schools, also known as out-of-school settings, offer educational support and activities for children and young people outside of their regular school curriculum. This is with a focus on culture, language and history of their country of origin. So supplementary schools are not regulated, and they never have been, and which is why the Department for Education, the DfE, have brought in some new codes of practice to cover this.
Yeah, we did a podcast on that actually, John. So that's really, that was really helpful, I think, for a lot of our organisations. Yeah.
So we've now also extended our service to activities to community groups, which include voluntary organisations, faith groups, charities, and ethnic minority groups as well.
And we have a lot of these smaller groups actually in Camden, so that's who are doing some great work. So it's really great to know that you're working with those ones as well. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. And the kind of support we offer is safeguarding advice and training, legal requirements, health and safety policies, signposting to local authorities for support, adopting good governance, safeguarding workshops, scenario-based interactive exercises, first aid, fire safety, etc.
Brilliant. No, I mean, it sounds like you do, it's quite extensive, and that's really good because there's lots of different areas that our groups need support with, and it's really good to know that there's a resource there like your organisation that can help them. So that's really good, John, and especially with like over 40 years experience that you have, you know, working with the police and all these different organisations. I was just wondering if maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the case studies, some of the queries that you've had to deal with during your time as a consultant.
Yeah, sure. I can't go into any specifics of people or organisations, but what I can say is that, for instance, CCTV, for instance, is very important, as some of the incidents that have occurred cover things like children or even adults that go missing, or incidents of people that are injured during the organisation's care of that person at the time. For instance, a child or even an adult can fall down some stairs. Sometimes, insurance companies need to see this before they can deal with it. Or in some cases, people don't fall down the stairs and say they do.
Yeah, of course.
But, so obviously CCTV will cover this. Children or people that come in, children go missing, people that come into the organisation that you don't know, you've got footage of this to identify them if necessary, and that sort of thing.
And what if, John, you're dealing with like a smaller organisation who's like maybe renting a community space that doesn't have sort of CCTV footage? I mean, you know, and maybe something were to occur, is there something that they can do, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, a smaller organisation will obviously have smaller premises, So there'll be more space or less space there for them or a person that comes into their premises to get lost in. So it'll be just word of mouth and what you look for. We also do, you know, we also do courses or training on how to identify a person, because if they have to be identified, for instance, it will be usually the answer would be, yeah, he's of average height, average build, you know, which is not the case. You should start from the top and work to the bottom. For instance,
I've never thought about that before. That's true.
Yeah, and we use something called NASH, which is name, age, sex, color, height. So if you know their name, great. Approximate age, you know, obviously the sex, male or female, color, you know, black, white, or whatever, and height. And now, how can you judge someone's height? Well, you can't say he was 5'8" or 6 foot. Yeah. If you are 5'8", yeah, you could say, for instance, he was probably about 2 inches taller than I am, which is about 5'10" or whatever, you know. So there are things like that you can. And clothing, you start at the top again and work your way down. He had black or white hair, he had glasses, he had a big nose, you know, or she had lipstick, bright lipstick on, you know, wearing a jacket or a t-shirt and dark trousers, and, you know, or as a whole, he or she wore dark clothing. I couldn't remember anything else. Things like that, which are quite simple, that you need to, you know, think about.
And really sort of help in a safeguarding scenario as well, where you're dealing with something that's gone on. It's all those little things that, you know, you don't think about, but actually if you've had training on what to be alerted to, that could really help, you know, people like the police or whoever it is that are investigating.
Yes.
That's really, actually, I've never even thought about that. That's really good. And I know that when you did your training, I was immediately sucked in when you were talking about all the sort of, I know you said in your training, you play a video, a grooming video, and you get sort of different questions from people. That's the prompt for people. I will actually put that video on our website, but what type of queries do you get from doing some of that interactive work?
Yeah, very good, actually. Some of it is, I mean, it's quite straightforward and simple, but the answers we get from it sometimes are a little bit frightening. Yeah. So we go over what we would suggest are a correct way of dealing with scenarios. For instance, if a child that goes missing, yes, you know, where is the CCTV? Who saw them last? Were they acting strangely during the day? Who was sitting next to them in a class, for instance? Ask them a question, you know, what were they like? Ask the parents, you know, were they quiet? All that's, were they looking at their phone? Were they texting or whatever? You know, there are many things that go through on this scenario, and we get the answers from the audience by asking them the question, what would you do if? They would then reply to, we give them 5 or 10 minutes to think about it, and they'll reply to us, and we'll go over their answers in detail, and maybe make some, you know, tweak some answers with them. So yeah, it does really work well.
And what's great about that, John, is actually because what you're doing is you're drawing everybody in and everyone's learning from one another. So all learning from all those different answers, and we're trying to work out the right and the wrong answers together. So I always really liked that kind of training. Like, what would you do? You're putting yourself there, aren't you? And you're trying to visualize it. Yeah. And in terms of, you know, at the moment where we are now, so we're finally out of a lockdown. We've done quite a few podcasts in lockdown. We're out of lockdown, and organisations, I know a lot of our organisations, our community and our supplementary schools are still continuing to deliver virtually, but a lot of them are thinking about delivering face-to-face services again and going back to that. Do you have any advice at all for any of those thinking about that?
Reception staff, if you're in a big building, sometimes they have reception staff or even guards. So do they have a man guard, for instance? How many guards are there? who provides the service. You may have to get hold of the managers of the service. Are the guards SIA licensed? That's Security Industry Authority license.
Oh, yeah.
During that training that they do, they will have to have DBS checks as well. Do the guards have distinctive uniform? What procedures are there in place for reacting to an incident? And is the reception area guarded so they can see people going in and out? And obviously, have you got access to them by telephone if you need them urgently?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of staff, actually, in my experience, when I do this type of work, there'll be the policies in place. They'll have all of this stuff. They've even got the fire risk assessments, but a lot of the staff will probably not have seen it or know that it exists or even know where to find it. And that's another thing, isn't it, John? Do you come across that?
All the time. Yes, it's in most instances, it's a tick box for them to know this. But when it comes into practice, you know, in a live situation, it's all on someone's computer.
Yeah.
So what they need to do is each time they meet in their settings is have something in writing in the reception areas that each person comes through that they have access to. The first aid person on site, their telephone number. They need to know the fire risk assessment. They need to either have a look through that very quickly if they need to. It's not complicated, and they need to know that and deal with it if the situation occurs. They need to have telephone numbers of people that have access to schools if they're working out of a school, school wardens, for instance, if they need them urgently. Child could get, or an adult even, could get locked in a toilet.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can become very upset. A disabled person, for instance, they could faint. They need to get into that toilet ASAP. So you need to have the wardens, you know, way or tools to get into that toilet to help them. So yeah, so there's many things that we come up on with these scenarios in our training. I mean, I haven't mentioned there's a register of visitors maintained, for instance, as they come in through the entrance.
And that's something that's quite simple to do. It's just a piece of paper where people are signing in and out with their time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. You know, as you say, it's a piece of paper with a name and person, time in, time out. That's all you need. Are the visitors prevented from moving around unescorted? Do employees have ID badges? Now, this is something that we can provide free of charge. If organisations want ID badges, we have a quantity of them we can send out to them if they like. It's all free. Are employees, are they encouraged to challenge strangers that walk in or visitors that walk into the area? Being confident to do so, all subjects, are they subject to DBS checks? Who conducts the checks? You know, is there a reporting mechanism which shows employers how to report suspicious activities, for instance? You know, are employees given a security induction, which includes, you know, fire drills, fire safety, how to get out in an emergency, fire exits. So, you know, all that sort of thing. Student profiles, for instance. Is there a parents and carers registration form kept? Online security. Do students have access to internet or media on the premises? You know, are they supervised? That type of first aid, fire safety. That's all comes under our training.
And, you know, it sounds like a lot to think about, but actually, I mean, if you think about the example of the fire safety, that sounds like, oh my gosh, it's this huge, scary thing. But I know that when we were having our conversations, you were saying that it's actually risk assessments are really simple. They take a couple of minutes. It's
Yeah.
something that you can do. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be this huge thing. And once you've done it, you've done it, you know.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah, sure. I mean,
through, yeah.
there are, you know, a simple fire risk assessment is to go online. You can either go to the London Fire Brigade on their site, or to the Health and Safety Executive site, and they have templates that you can complete. They're very simple. All you have to do is fill in the gaps, but think about what you're filling in and why you're filling them in. It goes through it with you. For instance, you know, all you need to be doing is go around your premises with a notepad. For instance, a kitchen. Are there any fire hazards in the kitchen? Yes or no? What are the fire hazards? Have you got any inflammable liquid in there, for instance? Or cooking oil? Yes, you have. Well, you've got to make sure that's, you know, that's not in an area where it could become a danger. You know, everything needs to be put away properly. You need to have fire safety equipment in that kitchen. Then you walk through other areas, make sure there are no trip hazards. For instance, you might have buckets or fire extinguishers. You probably see holding open fire exit doors.
Yeah.
And people can either trip over them, or you know, in case of a fire, you'll need them urgently. You know, you need to know where they are, what other hazards may be. You know, you might have ladders in hallways that people are decorating the premises, for instance, that are a hazard. So you need to make sure that they're not there. You know, when you've got people in the school or premises, there are lots of stuff you can do, and it's quite simple, straightforward.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And even just like even talking through some of this stuff, John, and just having it as a sort of tick box exercise to make sure that all the staff and all the volunteers are aware of all this sort of stuff, because sometimes in my experience people don't think of it as a safeguarding issue. You know, sometimes people think of safeguarding as something that's abusive, you know, somebody that's hitting someone, a teacher that's hitting a child, or a child that's hitting a teacher. But actually all of this comes under, you know, putting those safeguards in place in your organization in the event that something happens, because you don't want it to happen and not know what to do. You know, it's about thinking about all of those things. So yeah. So thank you so much for your time, John, and thank you for taking us through that. I know that you do a host of different other things. You do, you know, your first aid, and in terms of safer recruitment, you take people through all those different lines. So if you don't mind, John, is it okay for me to put all your details on my website so that people can contact you directly?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and what I'll do is that grooming video that prompts people to ask you those questions in the interactive training, I'll put that on the website. I'll put your contact details. I'll also put down some of the websites that you suggested, if I think that might be very helpful for people. The fire tools, because all those templates are there. I think there's no point in reinventing the wheel. We can use what's already in existence, and that'll be really helpful. And I know, John, that your work with Camden is coming to an end at the end of September, but outside of that, people can still contact you directly, right?
Of course they can, yeah, no problem.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, John. I really appreciate it. And hopefully, if I get any queries from organisations, if you can send them to me on the VAC website, I can send those to John as well. So thank you very much, John. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Dianne.